Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, today we're diving into one of the absolute most critical shifts happening in technology right now. We're stepping away from the theoretical AI taxonomies, all those endless buzzwords you hear every single day, and we are focusing entirely on real-world, boots-on-the-ground industrial transformation. If you've been wondering how massive factories and critical infrastructure actually deploy artificial intelligence safely, well, you are in exactly the right place.
To really grasp why this matters, we have to immediately set the stage with the life-or-death stakes of industrial AI. Think about it. If your consumer chatbot hallucinates and makes a typo in a marketing email, it's a minor annoyance. You laugh, you send a quick apology, and you move on. But what happens if an untrained AI hallucinates while it's running a high-pressure refining control loop? It could issue a physics-violating command that causes a literal catastrophe. The physical risks of deploying AI in industrial settings are absolute, and treating these two scenarios like they're the same thing is incredibly dangerous. Okay, let's dive into this roadmap. First up, we'll look at the high stakes of AI. Then, we'll unpack ARC's three-axis taxonomy map, explore the missing deployment gap, and introduce IPE, the deployment engine. Finally, we'll ground it all in process reality and build out the complete activation stack. Let's get going.
Section 1. The high stakes of AI, moving way beyond the buzzwords.
Right now, the industrial sector is literally drowning in generic AI marketing noise. It's everywhere. But ARC Advisory Group, a leading research firm, recognized a massive problem here. Treating all AI like it's the exact same thing creates a really dangerous false equivalency. Broad buzzwords just end up obscuring operational safety. You simply cannot swap out a fun consumer-grade novelty for a heavy-duty industrial tool. Doing that puts actual lives, not to mention huge amounts of capital, on the line. What the industry desperately needed was a definitive procurement scorecard to finally separate the hype from reality.
Section 2. ARC's three-axis taxonomy map, or how we evaluate the destination.
So to cut through all that hype, ARC built this brilliant translation layer. It's based on a solid rule of three, scoring AI vendors against hard physical realities. Axis 1 is all about the operational domain and physical consequence. Basically, if this thing fails, what blows up? Axis 2 looks at model architecture. Are we talking about a simple copilot helping out, or a hardcore first principles physics model? And Axis 3, that's governance and data context. How strictly regulated and grounded is this AI? By pulling those three axes together, ARC actually mapped over 120 global vendors into 6 highly specific industrial AI archetypes. We're talking everything from a basic industrial copilot that keeps a human squarely in the loop, all the way up to a certified execution agent running things completely autonomously in ultra-strict FDA-regulated environments. It is exactly the map you need to figure out what you actually need to buy.
All right, Section 3. The missing deployment gap. Because, well, a map without a vehicle doesn't get you very far.
And here is the kicker. ARC's map is incredible, but a map alone can't physically drive you to the finish line. Look at this fulcrum quote right from ARC's Axis 3, Level 4 requirement. The algorithm is secondary, governance is the product. Think about how huge that is. If you're running a nuclear plant, or making aerospace parts, or mixing pharmaceuticals, total transparency, explainability, and strict change control are non-negotiable. It doesn't matter how fancy the AI math is if you can't prove exactly how and why it made a specific decision.
So that brings us to the million-dollar question. How do you actually operationalize that governance? How on earth does a company build immutable, unchangeable decision paths right into their daily operations? Because, spoiler alert, no software vendor out there is just going to sell you a magical box of governance to install on a server.
And the data totally backs this up. ARC surveyed over 500 organizations and found this massive widening digital divide. The difference between the AI pace setters and everyone else wasn't about who bought the flashiest technology. Not at all. It was entirely a question of structured adoption. You literally cannot buy governance. You have to build it from the ground up, through solid processes, and by getting your workforce completely aligned.
Moving on to Section 4. IPE, the deployment engine. This is the how of governance.
So how exactly do we build it? Enter John Kachot's Integrated Process Excellence Framework, or IPE for short. Think of this as your 6-step deployment engine. You don't just flip a switch and turn AI on. First, you've got to create a positive environment and get leadership on board. Then you clearly define and document the exact physical processes. Step 4, you over-communicate that process to your workforce. Then you measure and control it with strict KPIs. And finally, Step 6, you drive continuous improvement using frameworks like Quality Cost 4.0. It is a methodical, step-by-step engine. And it is so cool how these two frameworks perfectly snap together. Arc tells you the exact strict governance archetype you need, and specific IPE steps systematically build that exact level of compliance. Deploying an industrial copilot? You'll lean heavily on steps 2 through 5 to keep a human in the loop. But what if you're deploying a highly regulated certified agent? Well, you are going to need all 6 of those steps firing flawlessly to create a completely traceable decision path.
Section 5. Grounding AI in process reality. Let's connect that data to the real world.
Okay, let's get down to the gritty reality of the factory floor. This is where IPE brings in something called KIV, KPV, KOV. That stands for Key Input, Process, and Output Variables. It's kind of like baking a cake, right? You have your ingredients, the inputs. You have your oven temperature, the process, and your final dessert, the output. If an AI data fabric doesn't have this causal architecture, it's basically just blindly hoarding data without any real-world semantic context. An AI just cannot intelligently optimize a factory unless it fundamentally understands the direct relationship between those inputs, processes, and outputs.
To make this happen, IPE meticulously breaks down the physical process into a clear hierarchy. It starts up top at level 0, the macro area, and drills all the way down to the level 2 element. Now, this element level is absolutely crucial. It maps out the exact, discrete process steps and control actions. It acts as the absolute operational anchor. It forces the AI to act deterministically, based on actual reality. And honestly, that is the only way you're ever going to establish true trust.
And we can never forget, people run industries. AI doesn't. One of the biggest challenges right now is the retiring workforce taking all that deep, undocumented tribal knowledge out the door with them. That is why Step 4 of the IPE engine is so vital. It specifically structures and transfers that retiring expert knowledge directly into the system. It keeps the human squarely in the loop, bridges the skills gap, and actually ensures that your workforce adopts these new AI tools instead of fighting them.
And that brings us to our final section, Section 6, the complete activation stack, combining ARC and IP. Let's bring this whole thing together into an end-to-end activation stack. You kick things off with Arc's market intelligence, so you pick the right vendor. Then, you lay down your process foundation using IPE's steps 2 and 3, giving the AI its semantic context. Next, you layer on steps 1, 4, and 5 to build out bulletproof operationalized governance. And finally, you lock the whole thing down with step 6 and risk analysis to ensure continuous alignment and completely prevent the AI model from drifting over time. This stack takes an organization all the way from just browsing the market to delivering rock-solid, measurable operational performance.
And the real-world applications for this stack, they are massive and immediate. In discrete manufacturing, like building cars, it ensures your AI co-pilots are completely grounded in standard work. Over in pharmaceuticals, it guarantees those rigid, immutable audit trails you absolutely must have for FDA compliance. And for energy grids or critical infrastructure, it builds in real-time physical hard stops that will instantly halt an autonomous AI agent before it does something disastrous.
So, what's the big takeaway from all of this? Simply put, a taxonomy without a process is really nothing more than a fancy procurement guide. You could buy the absolute best, most expensive AI algorithm on the market, and it will still fail if you don't have the structured process, deployment, and the cultural readiness to actually sustain it. The true pace setters out there, they win because they do the hard work of building their organizational and workforce capabilities first.
So I'm going to leave you with a final thought to chew on for your own operations. ARC has handed us the ultimate definitive map of the industrial AI landscape. You know exactly what destination you need to reach. The only question now is, are you ready to actually build the engine to get there? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep exploring and keep learning.